"Oh my goodness!" Piper cried, seeing the scene in front of the bakery. Loaves scattered across the stone floor, broken cookies, and a young man in a simple uniform kneeling amidst the mess, his face flushed with embarrassment. What a disaster was this? Wyatt looked up, feeling the weight of dozens of curious stares from passers-by who had stopped to observe the accident. His hands trembled as he tried to gather the breads he had dropped after tripping on the bakery's doorstep. 24 years old, recently graduated with a degree in agronomy, heir to one of the largest farms in the region, and there he was, making the biggest fool of himself in front of the town's most beloved baker. "Sorry, miss, I'll pay for all of this," he mumbled, avoiding looking directly at Piper. "I was in a rush and didn't see the step." Piper watched the young man for a few seconds. There was something different about him. His hands, though calloused from hard work, held a delicate touch that didn't match the worn uniform he wore. His brown hair was neatly cut, and when he finally looked at her, she noticed blue eyes that seemed to carry the weight of some secret. "Calm down, mister," she said, bending down to help him collect the breads. "It happens. Wait here, and I'll get you some other rolls. And next time, come earlier, and I'll help you carry them." Piper's sincere smile hit Wyatt like a punch to the gut. When was the last time someone had treated him with such naturalness? Without deference, without the automatic "yes, sir," without that calculating glint in their eyes that always appeared when they discovered his last name. "You don't have to do that," he murmured, but Piper had already stood up and was walking towards the counter. "Of course I do. My grandmother always said that those who work hard deserve to be treated with kindness." She returned with a new bag, full of fresh, warm breads. "Here, and don't look at me like a lost puppy. Everyone stumbles sometimes." Piper's bakery was small but cozy. The exposed brick walls contrasted with the dark wooden shelves where loaves of different shapes and sizes were lined up. The aroma of yeast and cinnamon hung in the air, mixed with the scent of coffee she always kept brewing for customers. "What's your name?" Piper asked, wiping her hands on her floral apron. "Wyatt," he replied, hesitating for a moment before adding, "Wyatt Smith. Nice to meet you, Wyatt Smith. I'm Piper." She extended her hand, which he carefully shook. "You work at Sterling Farms, right?" "I recognize the uniform." Wyatt nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for the lie by omission. Technically, he did work on the farm, but as the owner, not an employee. I just started a little while ago," he said, which also wasn't a lie. He had returned from Chicago only 2 weeks prior, determined to get to know every sector of the property that would one day officially be his. "That's great. The folks there are good people. They always buy bread here." Piper tilted her head, studying his face. "Funny, I don't remember seeing you before." I've been traveling." Wyatt swallowed hard. Each word was a small betrayal of the trust he saw growing in Piper's brown eyes. The church bells chimed 4 o'clock, and Wyatt realized he was late for his meeting with the foreman. But something held him there, in the presence of this woman who treated him as if he were just another young man from the countryside. "I need to go," he said, picking up the bag. "How much do I owe you?" Piper shook her head. "I told you. It's on the house. But you owe me one thing. Come back tomorrow and tell me if the boys like the breads." Wyatt smiled, the first genuine smile he had given since returning to town. "I promise." As he left the bakery, he turned one last time. Piper was reorganizing the display, humming softly a tune he didn't recognize. The golden afternoon light fell on her dark hair, tied in a loose bun, and Wyatt felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the desire to return. But as he walked down Main Street towards the farm, guilt began to weigh on his shoulders. Piper had been too kind, too generous, and he had lied to her, or at least omitted the truth. And now, how could he go back there tomorrow knowing that every minute in her presence was built on a charade? Wyatt spent the entire night thinking about Piper. When his alarm clock rang at 5 in the morning, he had already been awake for hours, reliving every detail of their encounter. Her smile, her spontaneous generosity, the way she treated him without any ceremony. "You look like you haven't slept a wink," commented Mr. Hayes, the farm foreman, when Wyatt appeared in the stable. "Any problems?" "No, just thinking about work," Wyatt lied, adjusting his hat. He had decided he would keep his promise. He would return to the bakery to report on the breads. During the morning snack, Wyatt carefully watched the workers savoring the breads Piper had given them. Their expressions of satisfaction were genuine. "This bread is delicious," said John, one of the oldest cowboys. "It's been a while since I've had something so good." "It's from Piper's bakery, right?" another asked. "That girl has blessed hands for making bread." At 4 in the afternoon, he found himself again in front of the bakery. This time he stopped for a few moments, observing Piper through the display window. She was teaching a small girl how to shape a roll. "It's like this, Ashley. Go slowly, let the dough guide you," Piper said with infinite patience. Bread doesn't like to be rushed. The scene touched Wyatt deeply. There was something maternal in how Piper treated the child. The doorbell jingled when he entered. Piper looked up and her face lit up. "Look who's back. So Wyatt Smith, did the boys like the breads?" "They loved them," he replied, feeling more relaxed. "John even said it's been a while since he's eaten something so good." Piper blushed slightly. "Oh, that's good to hear." She turned to the girl. "Ashley, honey, you can leave the dough resting there, and we'll finish it later, okay?" The girl nodded and ran off. Piper wiped her hands on her apron and approached the counter. "Want some coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot." "I'd love some," Wyatt said, surprising himself with his own response. She served 2 cups and leaned on the counter, studying his face. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. "Your accent. There's something different about it." Wyatt almost choked on his coffee. "I spent a few years away, studying." "That's cool. What did you study?" "Agronomy," he replied, relieved to be able to speak a truth. Piper's eyes sparkled. "Really? How interesting. You must know a lot about crops, fermentation." "A little," Wyatt said modestly. "Then maybe you can help me with something," Piper said enthusiastically. "I'm trying to improve my sourdough starter, but sometimes it gets a little too sour. Do you have any tips?" Wyatt perked up. Finally, a subject where he could be completely honest. "The acidity has to do with the temperature and the type of flour you use," he explained. "If you lower the ambient temperature and use a higher proportion of all-purpose flour, the flavor will be milder." Piper listened attentively, asking intelligent questions. The conversation flowed naturally, and Wyatt found himself sharing techniques he had learned at university. "Wow, you know so much!" Piper exclaimed, impressed. "Where did you learn all this?" Wyatt hesitated. I really like to read about the subject, and I had some very good professors." The church bells chimed 5 o'clock, and the bakery began to fill up. Piper excused herself and went to serve an elderly lady. Wyatt watched how she treated each customer with personalized care. She knew their names, asked about their families. She was more than a merchant. She was a central figure in the life of that community. "Mrs. Jenkins, how's your grandson?" Piper asked. "Getting better, thank goodness. And thanks for sending that soup the other day. You have a heart of gold, dear." When the movement subsided, Wyatt approached again. "You know everyone in town," he observed. "Practically," Piper laughed. "I was born and raised here. My grandmother had this bakery before me. It's more than a business, you know. It's a little piece of everyone's life. And you never thought about leaving, seeing other places?" Piper looked thoughtful. "I have, yes. Sometimes I dream of traveling, getting to know other cultures, other recipes, but this is my place." There was a subtle melancholy in her voice that Wyatt couldn't ignore. "And you?" she asked. "Do you plan to stay here?" "For now, yes," Wyatt replied. "I'm discovering things about myself I didn't know." Piper looked at him with curiosity but didn't press. Wyatt finished his coffee and prepared to leave but hesitated at the door. "Piper, can I ask you a question?" "Sure. Why were you so kind to me yesterday? You didn't even know me." Piper considered the question. "My grandmother always said you never know what kind of day a person is having. Sometimes a simple gesture can change everything." She smiled. "Besides, you seem to need a little kindness." The words echoed in Wyatt's mind as he walked back. Piper had seen something in him that even he hadn't recognized. But with that realization came a disturbing certainty. Each day that passed without telling the truth would make it harder to reveal who he really was. 3 days passed, and Wyatt found himself inventing excuses to return to the bakery. The first time, he claimed doubts about the dough's proofing time. The second, he asked for suggestions for breads for an employee barbecue. The third, he simply walked in and ordered a coffee. "You're becoming a regular customer," Piper joked, serving him the drink. "Not that I'm complaining, but aren't the folks at the farm missing you?" Wyatt blushed. I have a flexible schedule." In truth, he had completely reorganized his routine. He would show up at the farm early in the morning, resolve urgent matters, and sneak away in the middle of the afternoon for his technical visits to the bakery. "Lucky you," Piper sighed. "I wake up at 4 in the morning every day to prepare the first batch." 4 in the morning? Isn't that exhausting? It is, but it's part of it. My grandmother always said that good bread is made in the early hours when the world is quiet. Piper smiled dreamily. "It might sound crazy, but I like those moments. That's when I think, plan, dream." "Dream about what?" Piper hesitated. "Silly things. Expanding the bakery, creating a line of specialty breads, teaching others." She shook her head. "But they're just daydreams." "Why silly? They sound like sensible plans." "Because plans cost money, and money isn't abundant around here." Piper shrugged, but Wyatt noticed the frustration. "Besides, who would want to learn from a small-town baker?" "I would." The words came out before Wyatt could think them. Piper stared at him, surprised. "Really?" "Absolutely. You have incredible knowledge, Piper. Everyone who walks in here leaves smiling. That's no small thing." Piper lit up with the compliment but quickly looked away. "You're kind, Wyatt, but nothing. Have you ever thought about participating in festivals? Showing your products to more people?" "A festival?" Piper laughed. "The Regional Harvest Festival isn't for people like me." Wyatt frowned. That event happened on his family's farm. "Why wouldn't it be?" "Because only important people with big businesses participate there. I'm just a small-time baker." "Piper, your breads are better than many I've eaten in expensive places in Chicago." "You lived in Chicago?" she asked curiously. Wyatt realized he had said too much. "I spent some time there, studying." Piper fell silent, absorbing his words. "You know, sometimes I wonder if my grandmother didn't dream of bigger things too. She always talked about recipes she learned when she was young. And what stopped her? Life, right? She married early, had responsibilities. When my mom died and my dad left, she raised me here. She never complained, but I always wondered if she didn't miss more." "And you? Don't you want more?" Piper looked at him. "Yes, I do. But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of trying and finding out I'm not good enough. Of losing what I already have." The vulnerability in Piper's voice touched Wyatt deeply. He wanted to tell her everything, but the words caught in his throat. "Sometimes you have to take a risk to discover what you're capable of," he said softly. She smiled sadly. Easy to say, hard to do. Just then, the door opened, and a man entered. It was Chad, owner of the rival confectionery. Wyatt noticed how Piper closed off. "Hi, Piper," Chad said with a forced smile. "How's business?" "It's good, thanks," she replied dryly. Chad looked at Wyatt with curiosity. "And who's your friend?" "Wyatt Smith, nice to meet you," Wyatt said. "Chad Reynolds, owner of Imperial Sweets." He turned back to Piper. "I don't know if you heard, but I'm expanding. Maybe it's time you thought about doing the same, or considering a partnership." "No, thank you," Piper said firmly. "Think about it. The competition is getting fierce." Chad cast a meaningful glance at Wyatt before leaving. Piper sighed heavily. "How long has he been bothering you?" "Ever since he opened his confectionery 2 years ago. First he tried to date me. Then he wanted to buy the bakery. Now he offers a partnership." Piper shook her head. "He won't accept that I'm not interested." Wyatt felt anger surge in his chest. There was something about the way Chad had looked at him that he didn't like at all. When he said goodbye, Wyatt had one certainty. He needed to find a way to help Piper realize her dreams. But how could he do that without revealing who he really was? Wyatt spent a sleepless night, thinking of a way to help Piper without raising suspicion. When the sun rose, he already had a plan. During the morning meeting with Mr. Hayes, he cautiously brought up the subject. "Mr. Hayes, what do you think of the snacks we serve the employees?" The foreman scratched his grizzled beard. "They're okay, but nothing special." "Why do you ask?" "I was thinking, What if we hired someone from town to make fresh snacks every day? Something a little more elaborate, you know? Interesting. Do you have anyone in mind? Wyatt pretended to think. There's Piper's Bakery downtown. Everyone always praises her breads. How about we talk to her? Mr. Hayes nodded. Good idea. The girl is hardworking and trustworthy. I can talk to her today. Actually, Wyatt said quickly, how about I go? I'm already used to buying there, and I can explain exactly what we need. The foreman looked at him with curiosity. You've been going to that bakery a lot lately. Wyatt felt his face flush. The breads are really good. All right then. But be careful not to fall in love with the baker instead of the breads, Mr. Hayes joked with a mischievous smile. If only he knew how right he was. In the middle of the afternoon, Wyatt headed to the bakery with a pounding heart. He had rehearsed the conversation several times, but he was still nervous. How could he explain the proposal without sounding suspicious? Piper was organizing the display when he entered. Her face lit up when she saw him. Twice in 1 week? You're breaking records, she joked. Actually, today I came for work, Wyatt said, trying to sound casual. For work? It's just that, well, I talked to the folks at the farm about your breads. Everyone was impressed with the quality. Wyatt took a deep breath, and an idea came up. Piper stopped what she was doing and approached the counter, curious. What kind of idea? The farm wants to improve the employees' snacks. Instead of buying industrialized cookies, we thought about hiring someone to make fresh snacks every day. And I suggested you. Piper's eyes widened. Really? Completely serious. It would be a daily order. Breads, cookies, maybe some sugar-free treats for those with diabetes. A fixed contract. Piper was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Wyatt noticed her hands trembling slightly. Wyatt, this would be incredible. But are you sure they would agree? I mean, it's a big contract and Piper, he interrupted her gently. They've already approved the idea. They're just waiting for your answer. But I don't even know how much to charge for something like that, she said, running a hand through her hair. I've never had such a big contract. Wyatt had thought about that too. How about you calculate the cost of the ingredients, add your labor, and put a fair profit margin? I can help you with the calculations if you like. Piper looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and disbelief. Why are you doing this for me? The question caught Wyatt off guard. For a moment he hesitated, almost confessing his true feelings. But he controlled himself. Because I believe in your work, and because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you deserve an opportunity. Piper felt her eyes well up. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Wyatt smiled. Yes, Piper exclaimed, and then laughed at her own excitement. Sorry, it's just, this changes everything for me. It really changes everything. When can we start? Tomorrow if you want. How many people are there? Wyatt did quick mental calculations. About 50 people a day. Can you handle it? Piper bit her lip, thoughtful. I'll have to wake up earlier, but yes, I can. Maybe I'll even hire someone to help me. Perfect. I'll stop by tomorrow to finalize the details. As Wyatt was preparing to leave, Piper called him. Wyatt? Yes? Thank you. Truly. You have no idea what this means to me. The sincerity in her voice almost broke Wyatt's determination to keep his secret. You're welcome, Piper. You deserve this and much more. Walking back to the farm, Wyatt felt torn between the joy of seeing Piper happy and the growing guilt of deceiving her. He had created this opportunity using his position, but Piper didn't know that. And the deeper he got into this situation, the harder it would be to explain the truth. But remembering the look of joy on her face, Wyatt decided he would worry about the consequences later. For now, it was enough to know that he had helped someone special take a step towards her dreams. What he didn't know was that, from across the street, Chad had observed the entire scene through the display window of his confectionery, and the expression on his face was anything but friendly. 2 weeks had passed since Piper started supplying snacks to the farm, and the transformation was visible. The bakery buzzed with activity from dawn, and Piper had hired Mrs. Albright, an experienced older woman, to help her. I've never seen the girl so excited, Mrs. Albright commented as she packed the last breads of the day. It's like she's got a new lease on life. Wyatt smiled as he heard the comments. He had managed to establish a routine. He arrived at the bakery every late afternoon to check on the next day's order. But in reality, he just wanted to see Piper. "How was today?" he asked, entering the bakery that afternoon. "Better than ever," Piper exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "The employees are loving it, and I'm already thinking about creating new recipes." "What kind of recipes?" "Whole wheat breads, oatmeal cookies, maybe some sugar-free pastries for those with diabetes." Piper gestured animatedly. Mrs. Albright even suggested making a special weekend line. Wyatt watched her speak, enchanted by her passion. "You're radiant." Piper blushed. "It's just, for the first time, I feel like I can dream bigger, you know? And you should dream big. By the way," Wyatt hesitated, "I heard they're opening registrations for the Regional Harvest Festival." "Oh, Wyatt, we've already talked about this." "I know, but think about it. Now you have a stable contract. You can invest in new things. It would be the perfect opportunity." Piper looked thoughtful. "Do you really think I should try?" "I think you should at least consider it." Before Piper could answer, the door burst open. Chad entered, with an expression that boded nothing good. "Piper, we need to talk," he said, completely ignoring Wyatt. "If it's about a partnership, I've already told you I'm not interested," Piper replied coldly. "It's not about that." Chad finally looked at Wyatt. "It's about certain influences you've been receiving." Wyatt felt a shiver. "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know very well what I'm talking about." Chad smiled unpleasantly. "A simple farm employee who suddenly has so much decision-making power? Interesting, don't you think?" Piper frowned. "What are you talking about, Chad?" "I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just saying it's curious how things have changed around here since you showed up." Chad turned back to Piper. "Be careful, Piper. Not all that glitters is gold." With that, he left, leaving a heavy silence. Piper looked at Wyatt, confused. "What was that?" "Envy," Wyatt said quickly. "He can't stand that you're thriving." Piper nodded slowly, but Wyatt noticed a shadow of doubt in her eyes. "Wyatt," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. How exactly did you manage to convince the farm staff to accept my proposal? I mean, you haven't worked there long." Wyatt felt his mouth go dry. My superiors trust my judgment." "What's your position there exactly?" "I'm a field supervisor." It wasn't technically a lie, but Wyatt knew he was treading on dangerous ground. Piper studied him for a few seconds, and he saw that she was processing inconsistencies she might not have noticed before. "Okay," she said finally, but her voice sounded different. Wyatt realized something had changed. The seed of doubt planted by Chad had begun to grow, and he didn't know how to stop it. When he said goodbye that afternoon, Piper was polite but distant, and for the first time since they met, Wyatt left the bakery feeling further from her than on the first day. The following days were tense. Piper continued to supply snacks to the farm, but her conversations with Wyatt had become formal, almost professional. He felt she observed him more carefully, as if trying to decipher a riddle. "You've been acting strange," Mr. Hayes commented, when Wyatt showed up at the farm looking grim. "Problems with the baker?" "Why do you ask?" "Because you've had a kicked puppy look, and it only started after we began buying bread from her." The foreman chuckled. "Ah, young man, you're in love." Wyatt didn't deny it. How could he? With each passing day, his feelings for Piper intensified, and the growing distance between them was making him desperate. That afternoon, he decided to go to the bakery earlier, hoping to have a frank conversation with Piper. But when he arrived, he found unusual activity. Several people crowded in front of the establishment, whispering among themselves. "What happened?" he asked Mrs. Jenkins, who was on the sidewalk. "Oh, Wyatt, what a terrible thing. A health department official showed up today saying someone reported the bakery for poor product quality." Wyatt's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They said the breads were making the farm workers sick." Piper was desperate, poor thing. Wyatt pushed the bakery door open and went inside. Piper was sitting behind the counter, her eyes red from crying. Mrs. Albright was beside her, trying to comfort her. "Piper, what happened?" She looked up at him, and Wyatt saw a mixture of sadness and something that scared him. Distrust. "Someone filed an anonymous complaint against me," she said, her voice trembling. "They said my products were making the farm employees sick, But that's absurd. Everyone loves your breads. That's what I told the inspector, but he said he needs to investigate. They're coming back tomorrow for a full inspection. Piper wiped her eyes. If they find any irregularities, I could lose my license. Wyatt felt rage boil in his veins. He knew exactly who was behind this. Piper, this is persecution. Someone is trying to harm you. Yeah, she said, looking at him intently. The question is, who would have an interest in that? The way she spoke made Wyatt realize that her suspicions weren't limited to Chad. What do you mean? Nothing, Piper said quickly. I'm just trying to understand who would hate me so much. I have a suspicion, Wyatt said. Chad. He was acting strange the other day, making insinuations. Could be, Piper agreed, but her voice sounded distant. Wyatt realized he would lose Piper if he didn't act quickly. Look, I'm going to talk to the folks at the farm. I'll ask them to make an official statement saying there have never been any problems with your products. You would do that? Of course, and more. I'll find out who made this complaint. For the first time in days, Piper smiled at him. Thank you, Wyatt. I don't know what I'd do without you. But as Wyatt left the bakery, a bitter certainty washed over him. Time was running out. Sooner or later, the whole truth would come out. And when it did, he would lose Piper forever. What he didn't know was that at that exact moment, Chad was in his confectionery, on the phone with the same corrupt official who had made the false complaint. Excellent work, Chad was saying. Now we just wait for her to break. And when she does, I'll be there to comfort her, and to make her an offer she can't refuse. The war had begun, and Piper was in the crossfire, without even imagining the true extent of the battle unfolding around her. The health department inspection took place the next morning. Wyatt arrived early at the bakery, accompanied by 3 farm employees who offered to give statements about the quality of Piper's products. Doctor, said John, the oldest cowboy, to the inspector, I've been eating this girl's bread for 2 years. It's never made me sick. On the contrary, it's the best bread in the region. The inspector, a middle-aged man named Robert, seemed embarrassed. After thoroughly examining the bakery, he addressed Piper. Ms. Piper, I found no irregularities. Your bakery is impeccable. The products are within all standards. This complaint was unfounded. Piper sighed with relief. Thank you, Dr. Robert. Actually, the inspector continued, looking uncomfortable, I need to tell you something. The official who made the complaint, he confessed he was bribed. He received money to make a false accusation. What? Piper exclaimed. And who paid? Wyatt asked, though he already knew the answer. Chad Reynolds, from Imperial Sweets. He was arrested this morning for corruption and filing a false accusation. Piper was in shock. I can't believe it. After everyone left, Piper sat down heavily in a chair. Wyatt approached slowly. Are you okay? I don't know if I am, she said, her voice trembling. To think someone hates me that much. Piper, the important thing is that it's over. Chad won't bother you anymore. She looked at him with a strange expression. Wyatt, can I ask you a question? Of course. How did you manage to gather these employees so quickly? And how did you know they would give a favorable statement? Wyatt felt his stomach sink. I know the farm staff well. Yes, but... Piper stood up and went to the window. Yesterday afternoon after you left, I kept thinking. A lot of things don't make sense. What do you mean? Piper turned to face him. A regular employee wouldn't have so much decision-making power. They wouldn't be able to convince superiors to change the entire farm's snack system. And they wouldn't have the authority to mobilize other employees as you did today. Wyatt felt that the moment of truth had arrived. Piper, who are you really, Wyatt? Silence stretched between them. Wyatt looked at Piper's face and saw that she already knew, or at least strongly suspected. My name is Wyatt, he said finally. Wyatt Sterling. I'm the owner's son of Sterling Farms. Piper closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The air. Yes. Why did you lie to me? I didn't exactly lie. I just omitted. It's the same thing, Piper exploded. You deceived me from day one. Piper, please let me explain. Explain what? That you were having fun with me? That you found it amusing to see the poor little baker falling for the disguised boss? It's not that. It was never that. Then what was it? Piper cried, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you do this to me?" Wyatt approached, but she recoiled. "Because for the first time in my life, someone treated me like a normal person. Not like the heir, not like the owner's son, just as Wyatt. And you thought you could play with me? It wasn't a game. What I feel for you is real, Piper. It's the most real thing in my life." Piper shook her head, furious. "You don't understand, do you? It's not just about you lying. It's about how I feel now. Like an idiot who fell in love with a charade. It wasn't a charade. It was. Because the Wyatt I knew doesn't exist. It was just a fantasy of yours." Piper angrily wiped her eyes. "You know what's worse? Now everyone will say I was interested in your money from the beginning. Anyone who knows you knows that's not true. And you? Did you know that when you decided to deceive me?" Wyatt lowered his head. I should have told you sooner. You should have. But now it's too late." Piper went to the door and opened it. "I want you to leave and don't come back." "Piper, please." "Leave, Wyatt. Or rather, leave, Mr. Sterling. The contract with the farm is canceled." With a broken heart, Wyatt left the bakery. On the sidewalk, he turned one last time and saw Piper slamming the door shut. And he knew he had lost the best thing that had ever happened in his life. A week passed since Piper expelled Wyatt from the bakery. He hadn't slept well a single day, tormented by the memory of the disappointment in her eyes. He tried several times to approach the bakery but always gave up when he saw her through the display window, working with a closed expression he had never seen before. "Son, you look terrible," his father, Edward Sterling, commented during dinner. "What's going on?" Wyatt toyed with the food on his plate. "Personal problems." "Does it have to do with that baker?" Wyatt looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "Wyatt, I know everyone in this town, and everyone is talking about you two." Edward sighed. "Want to tell me what happened?" For the first time in years, Wyatt opened up completely to his father. He told him about the disguise, about Piper, about how he had fallen deeply in love and how he had messed everything up. "I see," Edward said when Wyatt finished. "And now? Are you giving up? She doesn't even want to see me." "And did you try to explain?" "I tried, but she wouldn't listen." Edward looked thoughtful. "You know, son, when your mother passed, I also thought I had lost the chance to be happy. But I learned one thing. People who are worth it deserve for us to fight for them. What if she never forgives me? At least you'll know you tried everything." That night, Wyatt sat in his office and began to write. The words poured from his heart, raw and honest. "Piper, I know you don't want to see me, so I hope you at least read these words. I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. When I walked into your bakery that first day, I was tired of being treated as the Sterling heir. I just wanted to be myself. When you treated me with that natural kindness without knowing who I was, I felt something I had never experienced, the freedom to be just Wyatt. And when I realized I was falling in love with you, I was afraid. Afraid that you would change towards me if you knew the truth. I know I was a coward. I know I should have told you from the beginning. But you need to understand that every moment I spent with you was real. My feelings are real. The Wyatt you knew does exist. He's who I really am when I'm with you. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that you changed my life. You taught me that there's beauty in simplicity, that kindness is a strength, and that true love has nothing to do with social status. If one day you can forgive me, I'll be here. If you can't, I'll understand. But I'll never forget the incredible woman who showed me who I can be. With all my love, Wyatt." The next day, Wyatt went to the bakery during its busiest time, when he knew Piper would be too occupied to leave the counter. He handed the letter to Mrs. Albright. "Can you give this to Piper, please? It's important." Mrs. Albright looked at him with compassion. "That young man is suffering," she murmured to herself. Piper saw the letter, but didn't open it. She simply put it in a drawer, along with her anger and her sadness. 3 more days passed. Wyatt still had no news, and hope was beginning to fade. That's when Mr. Hayes brought information that changed everything. "Wyatt, did you hear about the registrations for the Harvest Festival?" "What about them?" "Piper signed up. She's going to participate with an artisan bread stall." Wyatt was in shock. Piper had decided to face her fears, and try something bigger, exactly as he had suggested. But now she would do it alone, without him by her side to support her. A mix of pride and sadness swelled in his chest. She was moving forward, growing, becoming the incredible woman he always knew she could be. And he had lost the right to be by her side on that journey. But perhaps, just perhaps, this was an opportunity to show that he truly believed in her. Even if she never knew, he would do everything in his power to ensure Piper succeeded at the festival. It was the least he could do for the woman he loved and had lost. Piper worked tirelessly, preparing for the regional harvest festival. Since she had made the decision to participate, something had changed in her. An iron determination had replaced the sadness of the past few days. "Are you sure about this, dear?" Mrs. Albright asked, worried. "It's a lot of responsibility." "Yes, I am," Piper replied, testing a new rye bread recipe. "I'm tired of being afraid. If I'm going to fail, let it be trying." In truth, Piper wouldn't even admit it to herself, but the decision to participate in the festival had a lot to do with Wyatt. His words about believing in her dreams echoed in her mind, mixed with the anger she still felt. She wanted to prove, to him and to herself, that she didn't need anyone to succeed. The letter remained in the drawer, unread. Every time Piper looked at it, she felt a mixture of curiosity and resentment that she preferred to ignore. "Piper," Mrs. Albright said softly, "don't you think you should at least read the young man's letter?" "I don't want to know what he has to say," Piper lied. "He already deceived me once." But Mrs. Albright had known Piper since she was little, and knew when she was fighting her own feelings. Meanwhile, Wyatt worked behind the scenes. As one of the festival organizers, a role he had secretly taken on to have control over the details, he made sure Piper received one of the best locations for her booth. He also arranged, through third parties, for her to have access to top-quality equipment at no additional cost. "Why so much interest in this specific participant?" asked Brooke, the event coordinator. "I heard her work is exceptional," Wyatt said casually. "It would be good for the festival's prestige." Brooke nodded, not suspecting anything. Wyatt had become a master at helping Piper without leaving a trace. 2 days before the festival, Piper faced her first real crisis. While testing a batch of special breads, something went wrong and they all burned. It was a recipe she had perfected for weeks. "Oh my goodness," she murmured, looking at the charred breads. "How will I have everything ready on time?" Mrs. Albright found her crying in the kitchen. "What happened, dear?" "I messed everything up. There won't be time to redo it." "Of course there will. You're the most talented baker I know." Piper wiped her eyes. "What if I make a fool of myself at the festival? What if they find out I'm just a small-town baker?" "Piper, look at me." Mrs. Albright held the young woman's face in her hands. "You have a gift. And a gift shouldn't be hidden, no matter where you are." That night, Piper worked late into the hours, redoing the entire production. When she finally went to bed at 3 in the morning, she was exhausted, but determined. On the eve of the festival, while organizing her products, Piper again came across the drawer where she had kept Wyatt's letter. This time she hesitated longer. Part of her wanted to read it, wanted to understand what he had to say, but the wounded part was still stronger. "Tomorrow," she murmured to herself. "After the festival, maybe." Wyatt, at home, also couldn't sleep. Tomorrow he would see Piper again, even if from afar. Tomorrow he would know if his secret efforts to help her had been worth it. He had learned a painful lesson. Sometimes loving someone means taking a step back and letting that person shine on their own, even if it means losing them forever. Dawn brought with it the day of the festival, and with it, Piper's opportunity to prove what she was capable of, not only to others but especially to herself. The regional harvest festival had transformed the farm into a sea of colorful booths and activity. Piper arrived early, carefully carrying her products. When she saw her booth, in a prime location with excellent facilities, she was surprised. "Must have been luck of the draw," she murmured, unaware that Wyatt had personally ensured she had the best possible space. The morning started slow. Some visitors stopped, tasted the breads, complimented them, but sales were modest. Piper tried to remain optimistic, but insecurity began to grow. "Maybe I shouldn't have come," she confessed to Mrs. Albright, who had insisted on accompanying her. "Calm down, dear, the day has barely begun." On the other side of the festival, Wyatt observed everything from afar. Dressed casually, blended among the organizers, he followed every movement at Piper's booth. When he noticed that the activity was slow, he discreetly directed some regional journalists to that area. "I hear there's an incredible artisan baker over there," he commented to a local reporter. "Worth checking out." Around noon, the situation began to change. An executive from a hotel chain tasted Piper's sourdough bread and was impressed. "This bread is exceptional," he said. "Would you supply it to establishments in Chicago?" Piper felt her heart race. I never thought about that, but I think I could." From then on, it was as if a barrier had been broken. Word of mouth spread, and soon there was a small crowd around the booth. Photographs were taken, business cards exchanged, order requests noted. "I can't believe it," Piper whispered to Mrs. Albright. "It's really happening." Wyatt watched from afar, his chest full of pride. Seeing Piper shine like that, being recognized for the talent she always had, was at once the most beautiful and most painful thing he had ever experienced. Late in the afternoon, when the festival began to quiet down, Piper took stock of the results. She had sold almost everything, collected over 20 contacts from potential clients, and even received a proposal to host a baking workshop. "Mrs. Albright, I did it," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. "I really did it." "Of course you did, my dear, I always knew." As she organized her things, Piper noticed some movement in the VIP area of the festival. She saw Wyatt from a distance, talking with other important people from the event. He was dressed differently, no longer in the simple worker's uniform but in clothes that clearly indicated his true social position. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowd. Wyatt took half a step towards her but stopped when he saw Piper look away and focus on packing her products. "Are you going to talk to him?" Mrs. Albright asked, who had noticed the exchange of glances. "No," Piper said firmly. "Today is my day. I won't let anything ruin it." But as she walked towards her car, Piper couldn't avoid a strange feeling. Part of her, a small part she tried to ignore, missed Wyatt's presence there. She missed having someone special to share that moment of victory with. She shook her head, pushing away those thoughts. She had proven she could win alone. That's what mattered. What Piper didn't know was that Wyatt had followed every moment of her success, rooting for her in silence, too proud to approach and risk ruining her perfect day. When the last lights of the festival dimmed, both went home with conflicting emotions. She, victorious but strangely melancholic. He, proud, but with his heart even more broken by seeing how much he had lost. The night after the festival, Piper was organizing the business cards she had collected, when her hand brushed against the drawer where she had kept Wyatt's letter. This time, something had changed. The previous day's success had brought a sense of accomplishment, but also a strange feeling of emptiness. "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" she murmured to herself. Mrs. Albright, who was helping clean the bakery, noticed Piper's internal conflict. "You know, dear, sometimes you need to hear what the person has to say before deciding whether to forgive or not." Piper looked at the drawer. What if it's just another lie? What if it's not? After much hesitation, Piper took out the letter. Her hands trembled slightly when she opened the envelope and began to read Wyatt's words. "When you treated me with that natural kindness, without knowing who I was, I felt something I had never experienced. The freedom to be just Wyatt." Piper paused, reading for a moment, remembering how relaxed and genuine he seemed in their first encounters. There truly was something different about him, a naturalness that now made sense. "Every moment I spent with you was real. My feelings are real. The Wyatt you knew does exist. He's who I really am when I'm with you." Tears began to well up. Piper could feel the sincerity in the words, the real pain behind each phrase. "You taught me that there's beauty in simplicity, that kindness is a strength, and that true love has nothing to do with social status." When she finished reading, Piper was openly crying. The anger she had felt for weeks began to transform into something more complex, a mixture of sadness, longing, and perhaps understanding. "Mrs. Albright," she said, her voice choked. "What do I do? What is your heart telling you?" "My heart is confused. Part of me is still hurt, but I miss him. I miss our conversations, the way he encouraged me to dream." Mrs. Albright approached and hugged Piper, My dear, everyone makes mistakes. The question is, was his mistake out of malice or fear? Piper thought about the words in the letter. Wyatt had explained that he was afraid of losing the freedom to be himself. In a way she could understand. After all, she herself had been afraid to participate in the festival, afraid of not being good enough. Out of fear, Piper admitted softly. I think it was out of fear. Then maybe it's worth talking to him. Piper wiped her eyes. But what if it's too late? What if he's given up on me? There's only one way to find out. The next day, Piper woke up with a different resolve. She had spent the night thinking about the letter, Mrs. Albright's words, and most importantly, what she truly felt for Wyatt. Yes, he had lied, or rather, omitted the truth. But the feelings he had shown seemed genuine, and she had to admit to herself, she missed him. She missed the Wyatt who had encouraged her to dream, who had believed in her when she herself doubted, who had made her feel special without knowing his social position. I'm going to look for him, she told Mrs. Albright during breakfast. Are you sure? I'm not sure of anything, but I know I can't keep pretending I don't care about him. Piper decided she would go to the farm that afternoon. She didn't know what she would say. She didn't know if she could completely forgive him, but she knew she had to try. Some things were too important to be lost to pride. What she didn't know was that Wyatt at that exact moment was making a very similar decision. He had decided he would look for her, even if it was just to apologize one last time and accept that he had lost her forever. Fate, which had toyed with them until then, was about to give them a new opportunity. Piper drove down the road leading to Sterling Farms with a pounding heart. She had rehearsed what she would say to Wyatt countless times, but now that she was actually on her way, the words seemed to have fled her mind. At the same time, Wyatt walked down Main Street towards the bakery, equally nervous. He carried with him a small box he had prepared. Inside were the seeds of a rare variety of heirloom wheat he had brought from his travels, along with a note explaining that he would like her to plant and use them in her special breads. The two crossed paths halfway, on the small bridge that passed over the town's creek. Piper saw Wyatt first and hit the brakes, her heart leaping in her chest. Wyatt looked up and stopped in the middle of the bridge, as if he had seen a ghost. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other through the car windshield. Piper took a deep breath, turned off the engine, and got out of the vehicle. They walked slowly towards each other, as if in a dream. Hi, Piper said when they were close enough to speak. Hi, Wyatt replied, his voice almost a whisper. I was going to look for you. I was going to look for you too. A shy smile appeared on Piper's face. Really? Wyatt showed her the small box. I brought this for you. I was going to leave it at the bakery with a message. Piper moved closer. What is it? Heirloom wheat seeds. I thought that you might like to experiment. Piper's eyes filled with tears. It was a gesture so typical of the Wyatt she had known. Thoughtful, caring, related to her interests. Wyatt, I read your letter. He tensed. And I understood. I'm not saying it didn't hurt or that I wasn't confused, but I understood. Wyatt felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Piper, I know I made a mistake. I know I should have told you from the beginning, but you need to know that it was never a game for me. I know, she said softly. Your letter made that clear. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of the water running beneath the bridge. How was the festival? Wyatt asked. I saw there was a lot of activity at your booth. Piper looked at him in surprise. You were there? From a distance. I didn't want to ruin your day. He smiled sadly. I was so proud watching you shine. Proud? Piper, you have no idea how incredible it is to see you achieving your dreams. All that success was yours alone. Your talent, your dedication, your courage to try. Piper felt her chest tighten with the sincerity in his voice. You know what was strange? In the midst of all that success, I missed you. I wanted to have someone special to share that moment with. Wyatt took a step closer. Piper, would you forgive me? Would you give me a second chance? She studied him for long seconds. She saw in his eyes the same vulnerability she had read in the letter, the same sincerity that had always attracted her to the employee, Wyatt. On one condition, she said finally. Anything. No more lies, no omissions. If we're going to try again, it has to be with complete honesty. I promise, Wyatt said immediately. Complete transparency. Piper extended her hand. Then let's start over. Hi, I'm Piper Baker, an entrepreneur. Wyatt smiled, the first true smile in weeks, and shook her hand. Hi, Piper. I'm Wyatt Sterling, heir passionately in love with an incredible baker. She laughed, and the sound was music to Wyatt's ears. Want to grab some coffee with me? She asked. I have a lot to tell you about the festival. I'd love to. As they walked back to town together, Wyatt knew he had gained something more precious than a second chance. He had gained a fresh start based on truth, and Piper knew that sometimes it's worth risking your heart, even after it's been hurt. True love, they both realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about forgiveness, understanding, and the courage to try again. 3 months had passed since their reunion on the bridge. The relationship between Piper and Wyatt now flourished differently, more mature, built on honesty and mutual understanding. Wyatt had kept his promise of complete transparency, introducing Piper to his father and to the entire community as his girlfriend, without hiding his identity. Dad, this is Piper, Wyatt said at the dinner where he finally brought her to meet Edward Sterling. Edward, initially reserved, was won over by Piper's genuine nature and intelligence. By the end of the evening, he turned to his son. I understand now why you fell in love. She's special. Piper had also grown. The success at the festival opened doors she had never imagined. Orders poured in from Chicago restaurants, and she was planning to expand the bakery. Wyatt, I need to show you something, she said one morning, leading him to an empty plot of land next to the current bakery. What is this? My new project. I'm going to build an artisan baking school here. I want to teach young people from the region, especially those who need a profession. Wyatt felt his chest swell with pride. Piper, this is incredible. How can I help? Actually, she smiled shyly, I was wondering if you'd like to be my partner. Not financially, she quickly added, but as a consultant. Your agronomy knowledge would be perfect for the ingredient cultivation part. Really? You'd trust me with that? I trust you, Piper said, taking his hands. Completely. The baking school became a reality in record time. Piper had discovered a natural calling for teaching, and Wyatt contributed with classes on ingredient quality and sustainable cultivation techniques. Look, Piper would tell her first class of students, bread is a metaphor for life. It needs time, patience, the right ingredients, and a lot of love. Among the students was Ashley, the girl Piper always taught at the bakery, now 15 and determined to become a professional baker. Aunt Piper, Ashley said after a class, are you going to marry Wyatt? Piper blushed. Why do you ask? Because you look at each other the same way my grandma looked at my grandpa. He said it was the look of someone who found their other half. Piper's answer was interrupted by Wyatt's arrival, who brought exciting news. Piper, you won't believe it. I got a call from Los Angeles. They want you to participate in a TV show about rural entrepreneurship. Seriously? Piper was in shock. But I don't know if I'm ready for that. You are more than ready, Wyatt said firmly. And I'll be there with you if you want. That night, as they closed the school after the last student left, Piper and Wyatt walked through the gardens he had helped plan. Roses grew alongside aromatic herbs Piper used in her special breads. You know what's funny? Piper said, stopping near the main rose bush. What? When we met, I thought my life was already defined. Small bakery, small town, small dreams. And now? Now I see that there are no small dreams. There are dreams that haven't had a chance to grow yet. Wyatt kissed her gently. You changed my life too. You taught me that being true to the people we love is more important than any social status. Piper smiled. I think we taught each other a lot, and we still have much to learn together. Piper agreed, looking at the school they had built together, at the gardens they cultivated side by side, at the life they were creating with patience and love, exactly like good bread. They didn't know yet, but the future held a marriage proposal, a family, and many years of partnership in both love and business. But for now, that moment was enough. Two hearts that had learned that true love grows best when cultivated with honesty, forgiveness, and faith in tomorrow. A year later, Piper was in the school kitchen preparing a special batch when Wyatt entered with a mysterious smile on his face. What are you up to? She asked, noticing his strange behavior. Nothing much. Just came to check on the bread for the branch opening. Piper smiled. That afternoon they would inaugurate the second unit of the school, this time in Chicago. The project had grown so much that it had attracted investors and partnerships with universities, but she insisted on maintaining the essence, teaching with love and developing people, not just bakers. "Ready," Piper said, taking the breads out of the oven. "Perfect for the ceremony." Wyatt approached and hugged her from behind. "Piper, can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you remember what you told me about good bread?" Piper laughed. "That it needs time, patience, and love?" "Exactly." Wyatt stepped back and knelt before her, taking a small box from his pocket. "Well, I learned that love also needs those things. And after all this time, all this patience, and all this love," Piper brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Piper, will you marry me? Not the sterling heir, not the school partner. Me, the Wyatt you taught to be a better person?" "Yes," she whispered, and then shouted, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." When Wyatt placed the ring on her finger, Piper noticed something special. It was a simple band, but it had small details that evoked wheat stalks. "I had it made especially for you," Wyatt explained, "so you never forget that it was your love for baking that brought us to each other." The branch opening turned into an impromptu engagement party. Mrs. Albright cried with emotion, Edward Sterling toasted happily, and Ashley was already offering to bake the wedding cake. "I can't believe you proposed to her in the school kitchen," Mr. Hayes laughed. "It was the perfect place," Wyatt said, looking at Piper, who was explaining fermentation techniques to a group of journalists. "It was where I learned that she's not just an exceptional baker, but a born educator." 6 months later, they married in a simple ceremony in the school garden. Piper wore her grandmother's dress. Wyatt was radiant with happiness, and the altar was decorated with roses and wheat stalks. "Good bread needs time, slow fermentation, care," Piper said in her speech. "So does love. It's not made in a hurry." And when Wyatt stumbled into my bakery that first day, I didn't know I was witnessing the beginning of our own fermentation. The audience laughed and cried at the same time. 2 years later, Wyatt and Piper adopted Michael, an 8-year-old boy who always showed up at the school after classes, fascinated by the aroma of the breads. And to everyone's surprise, Piper discovered she was pregnant. "It looks like our family is going to grow in both ways," Wyatt joked, placing his hand on Piper's still small belly. "And she'll learn that true love is like homemade bread," Piper said, looking at Michael playing in the garden. "Made with simple ingredients but with a lot of care." On the morning their daughter was born, Wyatt brought a warm little loaf to the hospital that Piper had taught Michael to make. "For our princess to taste her first bread," Michael said proudly. Piper looked around. Her husband, her adopted son, her newborn daughter, and the aroma of fresh bread filling the room. She thought of her grandmother, who always said that happiness was in simple things. "You know what?" she said to Wyatt. "I think I finally understood the recipe for happiness." "What is it?" "A generous measure of true love, patience to let it grow, courage to take risks when necessary, and always, always sharing it with those you love." Wyatt kissed her gently. Best recipe ever. Outside the hospital, life continued its course in the small town that had united them. The original bakery remained open, now managed by Piper's former students. The school trained new bakers who carried not only techniques but also human values to their communities. And every morning, when the smell of fresh bread wafted through the streets, people smiled, remembering the love story that began with fallen breads on the floor and blossomed, proving that sometimes the best ingredients in life are the simplest: honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to believe that it's always possible to start over.